Why are so many teenagers turning to vaping? This is what I want to talk about in this video. And if you're here to hear yet another adult person talk negativity about the younger generation and how they're doing this and that, then this is not the video for you, because I wanted to really put myself in the shoes of teens of today and consider that maybe not everything they do is just because they're trying to look cool. Not everything they do is just because they're these I don't know how we look at these like weirdly mutated creatures that we don't know where they came from, because they're just so completely different and despicable to anything in any generation that came before, right? I want to put myself in their shoes, because I think there's a real deeper reason about what's going on with the young people today. And those of you guys who watch my channel know that I am very, very, very passionate about children. In fact, they are the category of human being that I care about the most, more than anything, because I now feel we're living in a society where children are being left more and more to their own devices, which is what's causing them destruction and to go down destructive paths, because they're being left to govern themselves when they were supposed to be trained and taught and disciplined in order to prepare them for the adult life. But unfortunately, it seems more and more adults are just trying to look for every excuse not to have to parent and to put the blame onto anything other than themselves, instead of looking after the children. And I'm not trying to say, by the way, guys, I'm not trying to critique parents and all parents. I'm not trying to say parents today are bad, okay? All I'm saying is somebody has to take accountability for the young people, and I've decided that I'm going to be one of them. Now, why are teenagers vaping? I really believe that, contrary to thoughts I've heard of many other generations, that young people are going through it right now. I think young people are going through it because they've never been given more freedom than right now. Which I think is not good for children, because if you guys think of actual child, like a young child, if you left a 5-year-old to their own devices, what's going to happen? Now, just because that 5-year-old becomes a 10-year-old, becomes a 15-year-old, the change isn't that crazy if there has not been an input. And child experts, guys, I look at a lot of scientific, research about children and babies and all that stuff, because I'm truly fascinated, also because I'm going to be a mom, so I gotta know, right? Anyway, and it's proven that children, they don't listen, they imitate, right? And I can tell you guys this again as an educator, as somebody who's taught hundreds of children myself. Children oftentimes are literally like Bluetooth speakers of their parents, and it's so funny, like, especially when you hear a child say something that you literally know they don't understand. Like, it could be something wild, like, oh, Trump is racist, and you're like asking like a 6-year-old, like, what's racist mean? What does racist mean? You tell me what racist means. Do you know what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say here is, I'm just trying to lay the foundation for the points that I'm going to be making next, that children as a whole are supposed to be stewarded, they're supposed to be taught, they're supposed to be disciplined, they're supposed to be helped, because left to themselves, they're going to be lawless and they're going to lead themselves onto the paths of destruction. Now, I think there's a lot of let's just let the children do whatever they initially feel and whatever they initially think, let's go on ahead with it, right? Because that's what they need to do. If, for example, guys, I saw this show, I was watching this, I like to watch these types of TV programs, where they have like, it'll be like a children's hospital, and they'll be showing things where they've got like super duper obese children coming in, or children whose all their teeth are falling out at like 4 years old and stuff like that, from eating sweets and stuff, or candy, depending on where you are in the world, right? And I find it fascinating how, like, there was one that I watched, and there was a mother, and her son, I think, was like 4 or 5, and his teeth were like just looking horrendous. This child had sweets or candy, which look at me being so like understanding to my audience, okay? Love that for me. Anyway, yeah, so she used to keep this stuff like next to his bed, because apparently he likes to eat a lollipop when he wakes up in the morning. And then when the doctors are trying to tell him, you can't do that, like, she was like, oh, but he likes it. And it's like, but you're his mom, you're the one who's supposed to be like, you can't eat that. And I think there's a lot of that with the young people of today, for starters. Second of all, this level of society that we're living in, if you're an adult person above the age, I don't know, even for myself, to be honest, guys, because I was already like, I was 16 when Instagram came out. Obviously, I did all the MSNs and the whatevers, and I'm even old enough to have been back in the MySpace days. And I know a lot of you can be like, that's not even that old. I know, but I'm just trying to say in comparison of the young people today, because a lot of these guys today, from the day they were born, Instagram was already a thing, and it already was what it was now, right? They don't even know back in the day how the thing used to look with the brown camera and whatever, and when it was actually just about pictures, and when people didn't spend 12,000 hours taking images. Why am I saying all of this stuff? They are being brought up with less and less accountability being taken for them. On top of that, more and more access to things as a whole, right? Online and everything. Not to mention influence online, as in influencers. We really call these people influencers. So influence online. I've heard so many children say, I heard a child actually tell me that they realized that I've heard so many people actually, not even just children, but I've heard children say that, you know, being on TikTok, they realized that they were gay because of TikTok and stuff like that. Now, nothing against gay people, guys. Don't get crazy over here. I'm just saying that, why is that something that 12-year-olds need to be thinking about? And whatever, right? So, and not to mention just that with the social media access, they also have so much access to all this hate online. So whereas back in the day, people, the extent to hate might be one bully at school. Nowadays, you could, especially if you're being left lawless on TikTok and stuff like that, which I've talked about this before, about how I was watching this compilation, and it was like no, I wasn't watching a compilation. I was watching a guy doing a reaction video to compilation of something, and in this compilation there was like a 12-year-old girl like twerking on TikTok, and her parents were just standing in the back of the video, watching her, letting her do it, looking like disgusted but doing nothing. Do you know what I'm saying? And so what do we really expect, right, from that regard? But my point being, then being exposed to all this hatred at levels that some of us were never experienced online, because we were at least old enough by the time we were using social media that we had a better understanding about ourselves, or maybe we were sheltered because we were back in the day when, you know, people actually looked after children and stuff like that, right? And they're dealing with that as well. Not to mention, they're dealing with this heightened pressure with all this social action stuff, which a lot of adults are really heavily trying to indoctrinate children with. You got to worry about the planet, and you've got to worry about the black people, and you got to worry about the LGBTQ plus, and you got to worry about this, and you got to worry about that. Like, imagine how hard it must be to actually be a teenager today. And I'm not saying, and don't get me wrong, guys, I do agree that there are many situations where, you know, like things are being overdone. Like, you know, there's a bit too much emotions and people need to grow a backbone. I agree. And even a friend of mine the other day sent me this message that was perfect, which was talking about how we don't need our children to be safe. We need them to be strong, right? And I agree with that. We do need to build the children to be strong, but it's not going to come from them learning through TikTok, the indoctrination camps that we call schools, right? And having the pressure of, I need to make sure that I'm green and I'm not killing animals, and I'm making sure I'm supporting the black people and the Asian people and the LGBTQ plus and this and that. That's not what they should have to be going through. On top of then whatever traumas that they've got going on. Because guys, again, as a teacher, as somebody who's had to have training in things like safeguarding and like signs to look for if a child is being neglected, signs to look for if a child is being traumatized. A lot of children today are not in a place where anybody is actually going to believe them, because everybody has so much negative to say about the younger generation. And a lot of times when young people come out about things that they're going through, the parents automatically it all becomes about the parent. Like the parent doesn't want to feel bad because the parent's doing their best. Just because you're doing your best, just because your child is going through something, that doesn't negate that you're doing your best. I believe that it was supposed to take a village to raise a child. I believe a lot of families are not being operating, and society isn't operating in the way God intended. So it's so probable that a lot of parents who did absolutely everything that they could, right, are still seeing, you know, horrible things happening with their children. And I feel heartbroken when I see parents who you know, who actually accept and acknowledge, you know, either their part to play or just how, you know, their circumstances or decisions led to what their children are going through, right? And they feel really bad about it. And I totally sympathize with them, because I know that a lot of those parents who are crying are usually the ones who were really trying the hardest, you know. And I was watching this thing the other day, guys, and this is why it's important to me, and this is how I got to the vaping thing, because vaping is very popular among the teen community. We're going to get there, guys, we're building up to the point, okay? I was watching these videos the other day about this thing called, I think it's a show called Intervention. By the way, I was crying like a baby the whole time because it was just so heartbreaking to hear all these stories. But anyway, and on this show, time and time again, they're dealing with these addicts, essentially, and somebody, either a friend or family, wants to intervene. And the first one I'd actually seen was, I think, Amber Rose did one for her friend, which I thought was so wholesome. She came to find her friend that she knew when she was younger, who's been addicted for years, and she wanted to have an intervention with her so she could get clean. One thing I found really super interesting, by the way, guys, is how a lot of these addicts, the situation that hurt them was when they were a child and when they were at home. And a lot of the time, the people who were around them were not addressing it, and they started to look to something to like offset how they were feeling, or to cope better with what they were dealing with, right? And it's happened time and time again. So there was time and time again where there would be like a mum, and she would, you know, remarry. There was a lot of step parents, you know, raping and things like that, God forbid, but it happens, right? There was a lot of that. There was a lot of just like, you know, abuse. There was a lot of neglect, because there's a lot of different signs of neglect, guys. I like I said, I've had the training for all this type of stuff, because when you work with children, you have to be trained in this, because children and young people don't always say things because they don't always have the words to. That's the other thing about being a young person, a child, and why we have to look after them, guys, is they don't always have the words. A lot of people been through things when they were a child or a teenager. Even they didn't have the words to articulate it until later on in life, which is again why us adults should be paying attention. And a lot of children, again, they did have people who noticed signs, but they just purposefully ignored it. Or what's worse, and what for me is like the utmost evil, especially if it's a mother, they ignore it, or they say it didn't. Not even they ignore it, they say it didn't happen. That's the worst thing, right? That is the worst thing, right? And so I think a lot of the children today are in pain, guys. I think they're in pain. They have nowhere to turn. The adults don't take them seriously. Their friends are just them, the blind leading the blind. Big tech, big pharma, the entertainment industry, the school system all want to indoctrinate and abuse them, abuse their innocence, abuse their naivety, abuse the lack of strong leadership through parents and wise adults and aunties and uncles and grandparents and all these other different things, right, against them, right, to cause destruction. And I think a lot of them are in pain. Now, obviously, other harder core things, you know, like illegal drugs and alcohol is not, they're not old enough to buy for themselves, right? They've not reached those ages, but of course a lot of them have been able to find vapes and stuff like that, which I don't know how they're able to do it, right? Obviously it's not gonna, actually I don't want to say what I was gonna say next. I'll leave it at that, because, you know, I don't want to, I won't say what I was gonna say next. But anyway, I honestly think that's why a lot of them are turning to it. I think a lot of young people are in the place where it's not even that they're just trying to be destructive or whatever, because they're all, I don't think all of it is that they're just so indoctrinated. I think a lot of it is they genuinely feel like no one cares, and who cares? I can't tell you guys how many times just meeting a child who's in a very, very tough spot, right? You being the one adult who believes in them completely transforms what they do. Completely, because they've never experienced somebody who's believed in them. All they hear is negativity from the adults. All they hear is, oh, you're just this and you're just that, I wish I never had you, you're just like your dad, you're just like your mom, you young people of today are this, that. Listen, I experience that still as a 25-year-old woman. I get the you young people today, and I'm like, oh yeah, and who's our parents? Oh, we don't want to have that conversation. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's true, because where did these children come from? Because a lot of people act like the young people of today, they just literally, it's like the, what is it? Is it the seagull? What's the bird? What's the bird that comes and drops the babies? You know, the story that parents lie to their children about. I don't know, I can't remember what it was. But there's that bird that they say, like, they literally act like this child came from nowhere. Like, I don't know where this, like so many parents today, like, I don't know where this demon came from. I'm going to tell you something I learned in education, and I've said this before and I'll continue to say this. In a scenario where you have a group of young people who are being bad together, right? This translates from school to prison, because I've seen it in both scenarios. School to prison. So it doesn't change. When you have the parents, I'll speak specifically about the mums. The mums who are always like, I'm doing the best for my children, you know, and I just feel so bad because I know that he's hanging around with the wrong people, but I'm trying to do my best, but his dad's not there, whatever. Their child is usually like the most mature of the group. Yes, is he in the wrong group? Yeah. You know what I mean? But he's usually the most mature, not really involved, probably will get out of it as soon as he can, right? Because he can see what his mum is doing. On the other hand, it's always the parents that say, I don't know what's happening with him. This is not where he grew up. This is not how we brought you up. It must be the friends he's hanging around with. It must be the school, whatever. Everything else is to blame. Their child is the kingpin. Their child is the ringleader. Almost always. Almost always, guys. As a teacher, I have noticed, and I've taught, like I said, guys, all ages I have taught. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have taught all ages of children. I've taught in schools, I've taught in colleges, I've taught in universities, I've taught in youth organizations, I've taught in community centers, even in church, ladies and gentlemen. So when I look at the youth of today, when I look at the teenagers, right, and what they're experiencing, I look at a group of people who everybody has something negative. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word everybody. Who many adults have something negative to say about. And yet few seem to be taking serious responsibility for their training, for discipling them, protecting them as well, mind you. And that's one of the reasons, guys, I will always be in teaching in some form or another, because I love to help, and I like that I teach maths and chemistry. This is what they should be worried about. They should be worrying about what their gender is. They should be worrying about whatever. They should be overwhelmed by what's going on at home. They shouldn't. If it takes just one person to believe in a child, it will transform it. So many people today want to just bash. I don't know what it is. I do think there's a little bit of a slight jealousy that, you know, I think there's a lot to it, okay? Because don't get me wrong, there are some extremes. Like I saw one video of some girl, and her mum were clearly not, you know, seeing eye to eye, and her mum was trying to kick her out because she was upset at her mum because her mum doesn't accept her pronouns, and she had this, and you know, she was of age that she could move out, you know. And again, that's another thing, because I think a lot of parents weaponize, like, oh, I'm just going to make sure they get to 18, and then as soon as they turn 18, no one can tell me that I didn't do anything. Now you're an adult. Like overnight, you go from being my child who I have to protect and look after to you're on your own. Like, I think there's something a little bit evil there, to be honest, guys. I'm sorry to say it, but I do believe it. Obviously, there's scenarios where I think that works, because sometimes kids do need a bit of a kick up the butt, like you go and work out what you need to do now, maybe. But I do believe that, you know, parenting, as all parents say, that it's your life changes forever. So if it's forever, then you better act like it's forever as well. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty. Like I said, anybody who feels guilt is probably the person who's trying the hardest, and you probably should be feeling guilt. Anybody who feels anger, if the shoe fits, because I'm going to say what I need to say, guys, because children are suffering. When I talk to young people, do you know how many times, I remember when I first started in teaching, I used to be the one that was like, going around to people like, oh, you know, you can just give up doing that. Like, you can do better for yourself. You can whatever. And then you start to learn some very complex situations. You know, how many children, even once they've the CPS or whatever's been called, right? They end up being abused in their foster homes, or nobody believes them, or the school says this, or a teacher has a vendetta like that. I've noticed this in teaching, guys. I've said this before. I think this happens a lot of the times with intelligent, charismatic young men in school. What can happen is you'll find, or even intelligent, charismatic young women as well, but I more so see it in young men, where they're not necessarily the cookie cutter, like perfect student. They're clearly extremely intelligent, but they like to mess around. They like to be the class clown. They like to do loads of sports, whatever it is. And the teacher will almost have a vendetta that they're so intelligent without doing every single thing the teacher said. And the teacher will want to just like get rid of them out of the school just because they have this feeling about that child. You know what I mean? I think we got to really wake up, guys, that some of these kids out there, for them, first of all, they're kids. So I believe, from my belief system and believing in God, that God, I believe God especially loves and cares about the children, because he didn't bring them in this. If he wanted to just bring us onto this earth alone to just look after ourselves on our own, we would have just dropped out of heaven. I believe there's a reason that we come out from a female that was impregnated by a male, that we come out looking like our parents, with the characteristics like our parents and everything like that. Could it be that God intended that we would be able to steward them in the wisdom that we have gained in our own lives? Could it be that God intended that we would be the people who would protect and cover them no matter what? And I'll tell you one thing, and I'll finish on this, that when you see the parents who really do the best that they can, the children always are better off in the long run, for real. Like, for real. It always works out, because I believe that's how God created the system to be. When the parents who just try their best, they don't look at their child as just some like demon that exited their vagina or something, but as a blessing, because even the Bible talks about children are a heritage, a gift from the Lord, right? So the way that we treat young people today is so different to that. And I think a lot of teenagers are going through it, guys. They are going through it. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I'll finish with you guys on, and some of these situations are so complicated. Like, I remember, I'll give you guys an example of a situation that I was a part of, right? And I think of these two young people all the time. I think it was, the boy was like 15, and I think the girl was like maybe was he 16? I think he was 15 and she was 13, or going to be 14 in 6 weeks, you know, that type of scenario. And bless their hearts, right? They were like the classic type of, like, he was probably like quite popular amongst the guys and very like, you know, macho man, like yo type, and she was like super duper like naturally beautiful type of young lady, you know, so she could tell she got lots of young male like attention from the guys. These two were in a relationship, and it was a very toxic relationship, which is wild to say about 15 and 13 14-year-old, right? Anyway, now they at this point had formed like this almost trauma bond that you see in adults, where like we both are going through so much, so we just like, we're just there for each other, but really we're like bad for each other type of thing. And a lot of adults would be like, oh, she should, and like they would have on either side, their parents didn't really like the other who they were with, rightly so, right? To be honest, for the situation that it was. But the thing is, both of their home situations were completely unstable. So on the one end, one of the young man, I think his mum was like severely like bipolar, and like she had so many mental health issues going on, so he was in and out of situations. The young woman, she was being actually abused by her stepfather, right? And her mum would work at night, and so she would be left with the stepfather. So she didn't want to be there, but she had nowhere else to go because her dad wasn't really involved. People are not believing her story. No one's really listening to them. Everybody's just looking down on them and assuming the worst about these two young people. And let me tell you guys, this broke my heart when I used to meet these guys, you know, and you would say, oh, you should call the CPS, you can do this. So many people were involved, guys, legally with the government and whatever. Well, not government, but you know, like child protective services and all that stuff, and they were still being failed even by the system. So if these guys grow up, if in 10 years he'd already been arrested a number of times, by the way, as well. So if they grow up in 10 years time, what are people going to say after this situation? They're going to be like, oh, well, you're 23 now, no one cares, you need to get it together. Oh, you're 25 now, no one cares. Do you guys see what I mean? These young people, and this was years ago, by the way, this story I'm talking about, I knew these guys from 2019. So now they're probably like, how old would they be? What year are we in again? So this will be 4 years later. So he'll be 19 and she'll be 17. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You know what I'm saying? And so I just say all of this to say to you guys, like, look, if you're a teenage person watching my videos, I don't recommend you do, because they're super duper adults. But what I will say is that, you know, there is somebody out there who believes in you, and that is me. And I believe that every single life that is on earth, God intended to be here, and he did not intend for it to be a life of hell or pain, but he intended for us all to thrive on earth, and that he loves every single one of us. And I think of all people, who is the most grieved, the most angry, and who will execute the most judgment as a result of the treatment of young people, it will be God himself. And so sorry to any young person who's watching this who has felt, or even adult, even if you're an adult and you're dealing, because isn't it interesting how all adults are dealing with childhood trauma? Interesting. Again, I'm not blaming only the parents, I'm blaming the village. I believe a village is supposed to raise a household. We're supposed to create a whole environment for the children, okay? But you know, isn't it interesting how we're all dealing with childhood trauma, right? A lot of people, why is it that they're talking about this with their therapist? Because they don't get seen. They never got seen in their family. No one cares. Now they're an adult. Everyone's like, well, you're an adult. Who cares what's going on with you, right? You just got to get with it, because a lot of those people also are dealing with their own stuff that they don't want to address. So the only safe place they have to talk about anything is in the therapy room. And let's just hope that they have a therapist that they actually trust and feel comfortable to talk in front of. You know what I mean? Anyways, guys, I've been like talking about this for ages. I'm super passionate about it. I'm super passionate about children, and everything ultimately that I talk about on this channel is for the sake of people thriving. And I believe thriving starts in the home. A happy marriage creates a happy family. A happy family creates a happy home. People who leave a happy home go out to create happy businesses and everything, and that's how we create a happy world. And so that's why I care about talking about this stuff, guys. I want everybody to get their justice. I don't care how old you are. If you need to do what you need to do about what you've been through or whatever, God has you here for a reason. He has us all here for a reason. I just wanted to highlight that I don't think all these things that people see young people doing, I think a lot of young women who are just out here hoeing about, it's not because they think it's great, it's because it's actually wild to them that like, wow, I'm really doing this and no one cares. People are just talking badly about me. Well, then I am going to just not value myself, because it's not like anybody cares anyway. It's not like anybody values me anyway. I think that's the undercurrent of a lot of the behavior we see with the young people and the teenagers of today. I'm just sharing with you guys my perspective. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe if you're feeling the vibe and you want to join the tribe. God bless. Why am I really going to God bless every single one of you? If life's a game, then let's play to win. I hope you guys hear my heart in this video. I'm not trying to make parents feel bad. I'm not trying to justify everything young people are doing, but I am saying we as the adults, we need to learn from our own experiences and the experiences of others. We need to take accountability and responsibility for the young people of today, because I don't think that they're just these demons that emerged from hell onto earth. I think a lot of them have actually been through and are going through hell and have no one and nowhere that will listen to them, or even if there are places, they don't even know where to find them. Why? Because they're children and they're supposed to have adults in their life who can share wisdom and knowledge with them of how to navigate in this world. You can't just expect it to come out of nowhere. And I even ask parents, and I ask adults this sometimes when they say, oh, my child doesn't do this or my child doesn't do that. I'm like, okay, did you tell them how to do that? No. Well, how did you expect for them to get to the point of knowing how to do that? Did you just come out from nowhere, or did somebody teach you? Exactly. I'll leave it at that. If life's a game, then let's play to win. God bless every single one of you, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.